Today's Christmas reading comes from the book A Kentucky Christmas, edited by George L. Line. And the name of the entry is Christmas Gift, and it was written by Jan Walters Cook. The weather wrung comfort from us, cold drizzles that started late in the day and changed over to snow after dark. Christmas morning came with the world transformed. Tree trunks and branches held a thin layer of snow and ice. Mommy woke us early on Christmas morning. She appeared at our bedroom door calling, Christmas gift to you." I sat up and wondered why her words were just that, words with no real gift to open. My Christmases held no expectation of a decorated tree with gifts spilling out from underneath. Mommy hung the same large red paper bell at the center of our living room ceiling every year, with crepe paper streamers flowing out from it like the ceiling of a high school gym on prom night. We had no central heating, and I jumped into my clothes and worried if Grandma and Grandpa and our cousins would be able to come to our house for Christmas dinner. I stood at my bedroom window and ran my hand over its crusted pane. Mommy had warned me not to stick my tongue to the frozen crystals on the glass, so I took my fingernail and scratched a dime-sized hole in the frost. I woofed and woofed on the glass to melt the hole wider and managed to scrape an even larger circle around my tiny opening. The frozen shavings fell on the windowsill, and a few specks found my toes, which set me to dancing in one spot. We had peppermint chips and other hard candies to share with my cousins. Daddy always bought a huge peppermint log, and we'd hack off hunks from it with a hammer. We gobbled up any loose pieces. We try to make the small chunks last and last. Sometimes Mommy would pound some of the peppermint pieces into small bits and pat them into the thick frosting of a cake. The Christmas cake that she decorated with assorted hard candies was the most spectacular. The icing was boiled, white divinity, lathered on with great peaks and valleys. The red and green ribbon candies gleamed like diamonds and covered the cake like precious jewels. It sat in the middle of our kitchen table, tempting each child who walked by. Each of us staked out a claim, a slice that contained our favorite flavor or color. Daddy's parents lived up the hollow above us on Nichols Branch in Rowan County, and they walked down to our home through that snow on Christmas morning. Grandma carrying extra eggs and butter to help with the cooking, and Grandpa with his spittoon to accommodate the chaw of tobacco in his mouth. Grandpa shed his coat and hat and found a warm chair behind the stove and set up shop, whittling little animals like squirrels, rabbits, ducks, or whatever came to mind. When he finished a piece, he'd hand it off to someone and sweep up the pile of shavings and fling them into the stove, where they popped and cracked among the hot coals, shooting off sparks that lit up the window of the stove. When Uncle Jim and Aunt Opal arrived, Jim and Daddy gathered around the stove and told jokes. Then Uncle Ray joined them. He was a young man and knew the answers to all the jokes, like, "Say, did you hear the one about Junior Smedley's cow?" When all declared no, but usually meant yes, and smiles covered our faces, Uncle Ray's laugh couldn't be contained. From way down in his throat, a noise began that fell on the air in short snorts of eh-heh-heh. My cousins and I stood off to one side and watched Daddy, Uncle Jim, and Ray garb themselves for the cold day in the woods. Daddy first pulled on his brown and white speckled socks with the red band circling the top, and then carefully folded his pants legs around his calves and lower legs. Then he inched his socks over the smooth folds of his pants to make a tight legging. Lacing his high-top shoes tightly, he stood up and shook his legs to gauge his work before pulling on his rubber galoshes. If his pant legs were too snugly tucked in, he needed help and motioned for one of us to get his galoshes started. Then the heavy coats went on, and over those, orange vests with big stained pouches for holding the pheasants, quail, ducks, or rabbit. I remember looking through the window, watching them move out into the early morning. A frozen fog hung in the air as if the whole world had breathed out all at once. A thin mist rose above Dry Creek from water pouring over rocks near the bridge that crossed to our house. In the kitchen, Grandma, Aunt Opal, and Mommy cleaned up the breakfast dishes. Grandma dipped hot water from the stove's reservoir and poured it into the dishpans. She had an ample body with big bosoms, and when she turned away from the suds and water, her floral apron would be wet down the front from the close connection of pans and belly. She hummed or sang all the time, and Aunt Opal kept up a constant chatter that helped to drown down all the squeals and laughter of us young ones. Then Mommy set her plans to action, not from any notes written down, but coming straight out of her head as to what the meal would be and how she would bring it all about. Since I was young and my fingers nimble, she called to me to bring some potatoes, carrots, and cabbages from the earth bank in the garden. The earth bank was dug in the fall in a well-drained spot, and the prepared soil was first covered with straw and dry leaves. Vegetables were stacked on the leaves in the shape of a pyramid and then covered with more straw and sealed in a heavy layer of soil. The earth bank had to have a mini chimney for breathing, and the opening at the top of the pyramid was covered by a piece of board and held in place by a big stone. The vegetables would remain moist and crisp, and if insulated well, would never freeze. My hands were small, and I knew how to brush away the snow, dig swiftly but carefully through the layer of dirt until the straw appeared. I reached inside, and beyond the leaves felt the round, smooth potatoes, the sharp prongs of carrots, and firm heads of cabbage that would become part of our Christmas feast. After I filled my bucket, I replaced the earth bank as I had found it, for not to do so would mean our family did without. As the morning and stove wood disappeared, my cousins and I sucked on our candy and waited until someone would spy the men coming, their feet shuffling through the snow, hunting vests bulging with birds or rabbit. Tea kettles and buckets of scalding water were ready, and as soon as the bounty was dumped on the back porch, Mommy, Grandma, and Aunt Opal would scald, skin, pick, and clean all the kill. When the meat began to fry and the hot fat sputtered under lids, our bellies growled for their browning juices, thick and sticky at the bottom of pans. Grandpa was a lay minister, and his prayers over the prepared food seemed endless. All the kids sat on a bench next to the wall and squirmed. First, Grandpa thanked God for all the many plates of food, the hands that prepared them, the joy of the day, our family being together, and of course, the warmth of our home. Finally, the amen came, and we'd be released for the feast. At last, our growling stomachs grew satisfied as our plates filled up, emptied, and sometimes filled up again. Now, over 60 years have passed since I sat at the table on Dry Creek and had my fill. Yet when I awaken from dream each Christmas morning, I remember Mommy, how I can still see her in her flannel nightgown standing in the doorway of my room. For a moment, I become that child again. Memory serves itself up that way, but I am older, much older than Mommy then, and a grandmother too. I call only to my husband on Christmas morning now. Christmas gift, I say. He grins and gives his usual response after all these years. And Christmas gift to you, too.